This is 9/11 Freefall.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of 9/11 Freefall. I'm the host, Andy Steele. Guest tonight is Richard Wallace. He's an architect from Chicago. He's a member of the American Institute of Architects, and he's one of the people that stood up for the Building 7 resolution at last year's AIA conference in Atlanta. He'll be talking about that experience. He'll be talking about the 9/11 controlled demolition evidence and just the smudge that's left on the architectural profession by the organizations and unions within its inability to address this very important issue. You're going to want to listen to this one, so stay tuned. I'll be playing that for you in just a few minutes. Before I do play that, though, we're going to do what we do every week. We're going to take 10 seconds of silence to remember the victims of 9/11, their families, and all the people who died in the wars that followed 9/11. We'll do that beginning now. And that is 10 seconds.
My name is Leroy Holsey. I'm a forensic engineer and a professor at the University of Alaska Fairbanks.
Steel is a very fire-resistant material.
When a structure fails, my job is to figure out why. Over the next year, with a team of PhD students, I will be rebuilding World Trade Center Building 7.
How does floor 13 respond with respect to 12?
Using the same drawings that were used to build it originally, we will reconstruct it virtually. Our goal is to figure out why it collapsed late in the afternoon on September 11, 2001, even though it was not hit by an airplane. The investigation conducted by the National Institute of Standards and Technology concluded
what we found was that uncontrolled building fires caused an extraordinary event. The collapse of World Trade Center 7 was primarily due to fires.
Our investigation will evaluate the probability that this was the cause of the collapse. We are making this study open and transparent. Whether you are a physicist, engineer, architect, fire expert, or a specialist in another field, or just an ordinary citizen, we want your participation. We are making all of our data available online. Every aspect of our process regarding the modeling will be shared. And we will be giving regular updates from the lab as we continue our work. Join us in getting to the bottom of why World Trade Center 7 collapsed on September 11th, 2001.
The views expressed on this show by guests and the host on issues outside of the 9/11 controlled demolition evidence are the opinions of those individuals alone and do not necessarily reflect those of architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth.
Richard Wallace is an architect from Chicago, and he's a member of the AIA. He's a supporter of AE 9/11 Truth and its call for a new investigation into the destruction of the Twin Towers in Building 7 on 9/11. He also spoke on behalf of the World Trade Center 7 resolution last year at the AIA conference in Georgia. He'll be talking a little bit about that today and other things. Richard, welcome to 9/11 Freefall.
Well, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Now, before we get into 9/11 and all of the evidence, tell us a little bit more about yourself. Where did you go to school? How many years have you been practicing architecture?
Well, I I went to University of Illinois for my undergrad, and I have a master's degree from Washington U in St. Louis. My master's degree is in architecture and urban design. And when I first got out of university, my first big project that I got involved with was with Perkins & Will designing and building the Standard Oil building in Chicago, which was later called the BP building, and today it's called the AIA building. And that was kind of an interesting project because Penny Pritzker of the Pritzker family, it was her pet project to build that building. And someone gave her the advice that if you could cut down the weight of the building, you could save money in construction. We advised her against it, but to no avail. She had other people advising her. And what she did is the exterior, and this is a big news story, you probably recognize it, or some people will. The exterior of the Standard Oil building, or BP building, was made of marble. And the standard recommended size of the marble thickness was 2 1/4. Well, to cut down on the weight of the building, she decided to cut it down to 1.5 inches. And that was awful thin. We advised her against it, to no avail. And the result was that over the years, the marble began bowing outward. And that was because of the heat and the cool, the heat of the sun and the cool of the evenings, all that thermal expansion and contraction caused the marble to actually bend, and pieces of marble were falling off the building. Temporary measure, they strapped the building with steel around the entire building, the height of the building, to keep marble from falling, but that was just temporary. They then had to go in and replace all the marble with granite, and at a tremendous expense. But anyway, that got me interested in the nuts and bolts of the architecture business. In other words, forensic architecture. When buildings fail, you go in and you figure out why they failed. Not much different than what the FAA does when a plane crashes or other, building collapses. People go in and figure out what happened. And so I got involved in that at an early age, and also got involved with the high-rise buildings.
And you also investigated when a dome collapsed in Seattle, right?
Yes, a few years later, I was sent as a member of a team of 6 to go to Seattle when the Seattle Dome collapsed. And that was a collapse during construction, and it was caused by false work. False work is the wood that holds concrete up when it's still wet. And they did a terrible job of building the false work, and when they poured the concrete on it, after it reached a certain capacity of load, it just all collapsed. And we were sent out to sort that out and deliver a report on the cause. And that was my first big involvement, and it got me in that direction. Those 2 buildings got me going in the direction of forensic architecture, which is what I've been doing all my life.
So you know what you're talking about, and certainly have a lot of authority to speak about this issue that we talk about every week on the show, the destruction of the Twin Towers in Building 7 on 9/11. How did you first wake up to the issue of the controlled demolition evidence and 9/11 itself?
Well, when the attack took place, when the demolition took place, I was in Ireland. We were burying a relative. In fact, we were throwing flowers into the grave site when someone near the grave got a call on the phone, and they announced that a plane had hit the World Trade Center. And from that point on, for 6, 7 days, 8 days, something like that, it was just nothing but television everywhere. And we were frozen in Ireland because we couldn't fly, so we had to stay there, and we didn't have any first-hand information. So I was pretty well brainwashed with all the simulated flying conditions, the simulated building demolitions, why buildings collapsed, and I was inundated with all this these computer-generated simulations of why the building collapsed, and so I was pretty much ingrained in the government's position, the caveman theory, caveman conspiracy theory. I didn't question it because I sat there for 7-8 days just watching these videos on television, and I just came to accept it without giving it too much thought after that. And I got involved with the AE, Architects and Engineers 9/11 Truth Organization, when they came to Chicago to the AIA convention. I heard they were coming there, so I went down and volunteered to work their booth with them. Up at that point, I had been learning about what their activities, and I got interested in learning more, so I thought I'd just go down and volunteer. And when I did that, I was then introduced to the many reports and the videos of Building 7 coming down, and the position of the Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth was they would concentrate on Building 7 and not get into the hugely emotional debate about the other two buildings, because in Building 7 nobody died. It just came down. It wasn't hit by a plane. It was pretty cut and dry, controlled demolition. So they have concentrated on that, and that's where we are with it. And it's a good place to be because they can't defend the Building 7 coming down. So then the following year, we went to Atlanta to the AIA convention, and by that time I was full speed on this thing, and I was one of the AIA members who signed the petition for the AIA to pass a resolution asking for an investigation into the collapse of the buildings, specifically Building 7. So I was one of the sponsors for that resolution, which failed in the vote.
Right, and also you spoke at that event. I'm not sure if you just mentioned that, but you've got a lot to bring to this issue, like I said. And just looking at Building 7, because you said it's hard for them to defend that, it absolutely is. In fact, they've done us kind of a service by leaving us such a flimsy official story to rip away at, and the fact that they left out the building features that would have prevented what they said happened from happening is an even bigger gift if we had a more interest in Congress and government to do something about that. But just looking at Building 7 right now, as somebody that studies forensics and looks into why buildings come down and why, in this case, why they shouldn't come down, what was the biggest piece of evidence for you, of all the evidence that you looked at, that you knew this was a controlled demolition?
Well, I'm a fan of building demolitions, and every time I get a chance here in Chicago when they're taking a building down, I like to go over and watch it. And I've seen quite a few buildings in controlled demolition, falling into their footprints. And also there are the videos on YouTube of years ago when they started the whole idea of dynamiting buildings. It was a new concept to turn buildings down. They started blowing them up. And initially when they started doing that thing, those demolitions, they had a lot of failures. A lot of them didn't implode because they were wired wrong. They were set up wrong, and sometimes the building would fall over on its side. I remember one of the buildings kind of rolled over, and it took them a few years, and they finally got the demolition process down to a science. And today, it's quite quite an exact science. Case in point, the demolition of the WTC buildings, all of them. I mean, it's one of the most successful demolitions probably in history, and isn't it funny? Nobody can take credit for it.
Yeah, that is funny. Somebody must have, well, I don't want to say they did a good job on it, because obviously the work they were doing was not good work in itself, but they were able to bring it down. But I'll tell you what, in my view, looking at Building 7, it's such an obvious controlled demolition that if there was any kind of goal of having it come down in a stealthy type of way, of being able to blame it on the fire, I think they failed, because it's just so out there in the open, arrogant, right in our face.
Everything, their entire caveman theory, their conspiracy theory of cavemen doing this is just ludicrous, and it's so amateurish, and it's like ninth grade thinking, you know. But with the Twin Towers, there's so much emotion involved because people got killed. People saw what they thought were planes hitting the building. When I spoke at the AIA convention in Atlanta in 2015, I spoke about the responsibilities that architects have, the heavy burden that we have in designing and building buildings. We have the responsibility to society. We have the responsibility to the environment. We have a responsibility for the safety of the public. But when we join the American Institute of Architects, we elect an additional responsibility that non-members don't have, and that's the responsibility of being ethical in our decision making. The AIA has a code of ethics that we are bound by, and it's very well written, and you know, I find no fault with it. I find fault with the AIA not following their own code of ethics when they decided to reject our request for an investigation. And they even went further. They not only denied our request for an investigation, they endorsed the NIST report. And they could have denied us without endorsing the NIST report. So they went one step beyond where they even had to, and they added one more organization's name behind the NIST report. That got me interested in learning more about the NIST report, because I was personally offended that I was now part of an organization that endorsed the official government explanation. So I studied the NIST report, and one thing I found out that I haven't heard anybody speak about is that the basis of the NIST investigation was basically flawed from the beginning. They were not directed to determine what caused what was the attack about, who caused it, how did it happen. That was not the purpose of the NIST report. The NIST report was basically giving them, it was a given that the airplanes hit the towers and the fires caused the buildings to fail. The genesis of the investigation, it was the National Institute of Standards and Technology, that's called NIST. They announced that they would be doing this report, and the goals of the investigation were given. And the goals were, A, to investigate the building construction, the materials used, and the technical conditions that contributed to the failure of the buildings. After, and this is the important part, to what contributed to the outcome of the building collapses after terrorists flew large jet fuel-laden commercial airlines into the towers. I mean, that's the wording of what was wrong with the construction, the materials, and the technology. So they were given the fact that the caveman conspiracy theory was a fact, and they were saying, figure out why these buildings went down, because it was only fire, and that was their job. So they had an impossible job, and because they were studying the way buildings are designed, the way they're constructed, how they're maintained, and the tools used by the industry, like codes, standards, practices, public safety codes. They were essentially attacking the victim, which was the building, blaming the victim for its demise. And so the NIST report was a fraud from the very beginning. In other words, they did to investigate the building construction, materials, conditions, etc., determine why and how they collapsed, determine what procedures and practices were used in the design and construction and operation and maintenance. I mean, they're attacking the integrity of the people who built the buildings. And so that's in fact, the word integrity is what is used when you design a building. You design integrity into the building, and that the integrity refers to the fact that it will not collapse. It will withstand all natural forces. And integrity is what architects are obligated under the Code of Ethics and the AIA. And it's all wrapped in together. And for the AIA to endorse this report that was attacking the integrity of the builders of buildings and the materials of buildings and the building codes and the safety codes and et cetera, it was kind of like it was like blaming a girl for being raped if she had sexy clothes on or something. It's the same idea. Blame the victim. So there was no investigation, and that brings up another thing. They removed all the evidence of the crime scene immediately. They just happened to have 350 trucks there, waiting on the side streets to haul this debris away. There was no investigation by the insurance company. Normally, if you have a building payout, an insurance company, they do their best not to pay it out, and they will investigate. I'm involved in a small project where a building had massive leakage of water during rainstorms, and the insurance company just has refused to pay out. And even in spite of the fact that we have reports, specifying the causes, but even in spite of our reports, they still didn't want to pay out. Now, why wasn't there an investigation, to a $7 billion payout for the collapse of the buildings?
Well, I'll tell you, I worked for an insurance company at one point, and I remember my first day of orientation. I just did customer service, folks. I wasn't writing policies or any of that stuff. But the first day they made this announcement during the orientation about how on 9/11, even though the victims that were insured had life insurance with this company, I won't say the name of it, weren't covered for acts of terrorism, they still paid it out because they were that good guys, and the company was just going to do that because it's the right thing to do. And they were very proud of that. And so I think 9/11 was such a tragic and huge event that I think it scared a lot of people out of going through the normal corners because they didn't want to look into it. And what if they did the same kind of investigation that AE 9/11 Truth is doing and they found the same kinds of things? I could see the news going after them saying, the insurance companies are trying to get out of paying and they're endorsing 9/11 conspiracy theories to do it. I could see the huge PR blowback that they probably thought it was cheaper just to pay out the money. And that's tragic because we got a real problem here with the official story, as has been documented on this show for 4 years and by AE 9/11 Truth for even longer. What do you think about the fact that they didn't even look into the possibility of explosives being used? They refused to test the dust samples for incendiaries or explosives, even though it's one of the recommendations in the fire protection manual.
And it's standard operating procedure in any kind of a collapse. You don't remove the evidence from a crime scene, which was done. That's the federal law was violated there. And not only did they move it, they moved it out of American jurisdiction. They supposedly moved it to China, if we're to believe them. We don't know. They said they moved it to China. Well, that's out of our jurisdiction. So that was convenient. But as far as this payouts, your idea, has some merit. There could have been some thought along those lines. But consider this. If not a single surviving family took their lawsuits to court when they were going after the government for damages. They settled every case by paying the people what they wanted, because they didn't want it to go to court. If you went to court, then you'd have a full-scale investigation. So they paid all the claims out. The government did. And, maybe the insurance companies were instructed to do the same. I don't know. But I can't imagine that they would, your point about, if the insurance company reneged on a $7 billion policy, they would then be tasked to prove their case. And, that brings up a whole lot of interesting theories and issues. So there's a lot of things we're not going to know ever.
Right, and I want to get back to the AIA conference because I watched a video of it, or it was a video of it, and I saw some of these arguments being made by these architects who were opposed to it, some of them. And I didn't really hear anybody attack the science or the evidence, at least not in a scientific basis. There was one gentleman who stood up and said, "Can't we put this behind us? I was there on 9/11. Can't we put this behind us?" And people clapped because it sounds nice and emotional and kind of puts forward this kind of camaraderie and good feelings that they're trying to promote after 9/11 of bringing people together. But it's not an argument. It's not an attack on the science. It doesn't rebut anything, refute anything. All it does is play on people's feelings. What do you think about some of those arguments that were made at AIA?
That person was Frank Pitts. He was a member of the New York chapter, and he stood up and says, "I was there. I was in the building. I was there." And it was, in other words, big emotional appeal to just discredit us and get on with the business of the convention. And that was Frank Pitts. There was another guy. Well, the guy that spoke for the board was, who was he? There was a Donald King. He was the director of the Northwest Pacific region. He was the one that, he urged a no vote. And he says, if their theory is true that this is a widespread conspiracy of the government and others, then this is an illegal act. This is a criminal act, the murder of thousands of people. This should be taken up by law enforcement, not the AIA. But we weren't asking for a criminal investigation. We were asking for an engineering investigation. So it was all this sleight of hand and emotional bantering back and forth. They had about 4 or 5 people there speaking against us. There was another guy named Mike Nolan Oski. He was from the Central Valley, president-elect of the AIA California Council. He was there too. And they all challenged us on emotional issues, just like you said. Nothing on a rational logical footing.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't hear a single defense, real defense, of the official story. Nothing that you would base any kind of logic on, nothing that you would hang your hat on as being a solid foundation for an argument, just emotion and people passing the buck. And no, there was nothing in the resolution blaming the U.S. government for doing 9/11. It was simply asking the AIA to acknowledge the controversy and call for a new investigation without taking a side on the issue.
It was real simple.
Yeah.
I mean, we couldn't have made it more simple. But their only defense was to attack on an emotional basis.
Well, and what do you think about? I mean, what do you think about the impact of this issue on people in your profession? Because in my case, or my view, when you compromise the integrity of any kind of science, that sets that profession back and that science back, and essentially forces the people in that science or that profession, in this case architecture, to defend a lie. I think it puts undue stress on the people in that profession to try to have to teach people that are coming into it now that random fires can cause buildings to fall, steel frame buildings to fall in 7 seconds. What do you think about the impact now on architecture?
Well, architects know that's not true. There are 83,000 members of the American Institute of Architects in America. 83,000. There were about 4,500 at the convention. And that 4,500 decided for the other 83,000. Well, the American Institute of Architects, it is the moral and ethical leader in the construction industry. The integrity and principles set the high mark for all the other professions around us, and it's been compromised. Do they care? They apparently don't care. So, unfortunately, the board of AIA joined the other side. They endorsed the NIST report, which is a illogical, false report based upon false premises, and there is no way that can ever be denied. I mean, if any examination by anybody with a clear, rational mind would draw the same conclusions.
Now, why do you think that there isn't more people looking into this? Why? Because I know the answer, so this might be a little bit rhetorical in a sense, because I talk to a lot of architects who are hesitant and afraid to sign the petition. So I got my own explanation, but why do you think there aren't more people who are willing to even look at this issue?
I think the entire country is, especially people in government, I think the entire country is kind of frozen in silence. I call it a conspiracy of silence, a conspiracy of denial. Most people know, I mean, it's pretty obvious that it was controlled demolition throughout. I mean, a couple of planes hit buildings and there's nothing left but dust. I mean, this is totally, illogical. And I don't think many people believe that. But I think people are scared into silence because they don't know how deep the treason in our government is. They don't know how deep the insidious takeover of our country is. Is it, does it involve everybody? Does it involve just a few? And, anybody working for government, as soon as you go into government, your life is set. You've got income for the rest of your life. You got benefits. You got everything. And to jeopardize that, stand up and be counted, those in power would take you out of power very quickly. And nobody wants to, on the political side, nobody wants to do that. On the private sector, I think you got a lot of mixed emotions. And when it comes to the two towers, I mean, people saw planes hitting the towers. AE 9/11 Truth organization concentrated on Building 7. Nobody died in Building 7. There's no emotions tied to it. It was clearly a demolition. It was controlled demolition. To do that takes 2 to 3 months in advanced preparation. I mean, every single joint connection, every column, every beam has to be synchronized and split-second timing. And you can only do that with a very sophisticated computer program. And charge is set everywhere at every joint. And you can't do this in a day. You can't wake up in the morning and say, oh, we better pull that building down. It doesn't happen that way. It's just not possible. It's impossible. So that's why our case with Building 7 is so good. They can't disprove our case. They can only appeal to irrationality. I mean, so they get a bunch of organizations that they claim are in support of the NIST thing. Well, I looked at some of those organizations, and one of them is the FBI. Okay, that's not engineering. That's not structural. The other is the ASC, which is the American Society of Criminology. Okay, that's not anything to do with engineers and buildings and structures. And then they have the NIST studios. This is the video simulation studios that made all the phony videos. Where they had a plane coming into the building and ripping the columns out and going to the other side of the building, and then the building coming down, and they're showing how the building collapsed by their theory, which is all fabrication. They're simulations. So you got the FBI, you got the American Society of Criminology, you got the studio that makes the video simulations. All right, that's three names they have here as establishing the veracity of their report. Then let's see if there's anybody else. And I think there is. They relied on the Civil Engineers Society, the Association of Civil Engineers. Civil engineers don't build buildings. Civil engineers build highways, railroads. They do horizontal things like airports. Those are civil engineers. But they created a committee of the American Association of Civil Engineers, and they called it the Structural Engineering Committee. Then that committee, which is a spin-off of the civil engineers, is supposedly the structural stamp of approval on this report. So you have four organizations. Well, now the AIA jumped on. Now the AIA is they have believability because that's their job. But all these other organizations have nothing to do with buildings. So that's the NIST report.
Well, and the problem is that the reports are flawed. First of all, they made a cartoon and then they took it up to the point of collapse initiation and didn't follow the motion of the building as it goes down. So that's not really a full report. That's just them making a cartoon and saying, "See, this is what we are telling you happened." And then, at least in the case of Building 7, it doesn't even look like the way the building came down. When you actually compare it to reality, when you compare it to the videos, their computer models don't even match what actually happened. And then you find out that they left out critical features of the building's design that when you include them properly, because they were there, it prevents what they said happened from even happening. And you try to get somewhere with the Department of Commerce, and they won't even do anything with this. And so, all these people, you can get them to, put their name on a piece of paper and not even, I doubt even they know what they're even endorsing in a lot of these cases, because they can't even defend this NIST report that they supposedly think is great. They can't even explain what the official story is in a lot of cases. So that doesn't impress me at all.
And even NIST itself, it's a non-regulatory agency of the U.S. Department of Commerce. According to the literature, NIST, the purpose of NIST is to do investigations to improve the safety and structural integrity of buildings in the United States. And so they're claiming that was the focus of the signing because that's their job and it's in this report. So what they do is improve safety and structural integrity in buildings. But nothing about how did this come about, who shut the cameras off? Well, we know that, but the point is there's no investigation into it. And then, of course, you already know all the other things about, the molten steel and the nanothermite and all that stuff. I mean, we haven't even touched on that, but many other people already have. My interest was driven to the NIST report because the AIA endorsed it, and that infuriated me. So I had to learn more about this NIST report, and what I found out was that it was flawed from the very beginning. These basic premises were false. And if you have false premises, then you can't come up with a positive answer, a positive conclusion.
Well, and NIST is so concerned about the integrity of buildings and safety. Well, what are they doing about the fact that according to the reality that they've crafted with the official report, a few thermally expanding beams can cause an entire steel frame high-rise to come crashing down on firefighters' heads? Because now I realize there were no firefighters in Building 7 at the time it came down, but those fires were very fightable. And in a normal case, that wasn't 9/11, where they hadn't watched two buildings already come down. And probably were a little bit spooked. In a normal case of a high-rise fire like that, there would be firefighters in there battling it. But according to NIST, it could bring it down, the random fires right on top of them.
Which is contrary to reality. I mean, these firefighters, 350 of them went into these buildings with the full confidence that they were going to put these fires out. Because that's what they do. And they know fires, and they know that they can put the fires out. So they bring their hoses in, and they march up the stairs, and they were sent there to their deaths. But let me repeat that about NIST. They're not concerned about the safety and structural integrity. Their purpose is to investigate and to improve safety and structural integrity. But that doesn't mean they're concerned with it. That's their stated purpose. And I think it's just another department,
Well, but what is NIST doing to keep thermally expanding beams from pushing a girder off its seat and bringing the whole thing down in 7 seconds? I want to know. I mean, I'm concerned about the safety of firefighters.
They're not doing anything. Not a single code has been rewritten as a result of the NIST report. Nothing's been changed. We still design buildings the same way. And, and of course we're all aware of the buildings that recently that burned for 24 hours, and steel buildings, they burned for 24 hours and didn't collapse. The fire went out. I mean, come on. These buildings burned for an hour and a half. It's pretty ludicrous. And I think most people understand it's false. But what I discovered that really woke my eyes up is that the NIST report was based on false premises.
Well, I personally think now that those fires just hated us because of our freedom. I think that's why. I think Building 7 hated us because of our freedom, and that's why it chose to go down on Building 7. Of course, I'm kidding, but that's the only explanation that would make sense. That makes about as much sense as the official NIST explanation. So it's still more believable than the official story.
When you get right down to it, I think what's really behind this is a handful of people's greed.
Well, these are things that need to be looked into, but to even get people to start from square one and say, why did these buildings to come down? And I don't mean people in the general public. There's people in the general public asking these questions. I mean, we're asking these questions to get people in Washington who should actually be investigating this to do their job and actually go investigate what should be the most easy thing to investigate, what should be the least controversial aspect of this entire event. Why did the buildings come down? To get them to even start from there is proven to be a monumental task because they don't want to investigate that. I think bringing those buildings down is just the sheer height of arrogance of whoever did that, bringing them down in a bright blue Tuesday morning in front of everyone and then claiming that fires did this. And I know it's important to reach out to the people that are coming into this world and are going to be assuming the positions that you're occupying now, going to be new AIA members, new people who are designing these buildings and may even have to take a stand on this at some point, because, folks, we're not giving up. I'll be old and gray still talking about this. What do you have to say to young people coming into your profession about this issue and why it's important to think for themselves?
I think that young people have to reinvent integrity and take it back. They have to take back the integrity of the American Institute of Architects, which was trashed. And I've always been proud of being, a member of the AIA. But for a while there, after the Atlanta Convention, I was feeling pretty damned ashamed. But then I talked to a friend, another architect and AIA member, and he convinced me that we shouldn't be ashamed of it. We should work harder to right the situation. So, and he's right, because being a member of the AIA, in my opinion, is a great honor. I mean, it's one of the most esteemed association of architects in the world. It's the largest association of architects in the world, and integrity is what architecture is all about. What designing buildings is all about. You can't do it without having integrity, because the buildings, you build your integrity into that building, and that has to be taken back, because the credibility of the American Institute of Architects has a smudge on it right now, in my opinion, and we have to fix that.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the most critical issues here in the 21st century. It happened 15 years ago, and it's just as important now as it was 15 years ago, because so much of our history, our past 15 years of history, and all of the future events going forward have been mutilated by this event and the official story of what happened that day, and just the denial of what is right in front of people.
It's changing the course of history.
Yeah. I mean, it is one of those things that, if it hadn't happened, or if we had gotten to the truth right away, things would be a lot different now. Just about everything.
Earlier you asked me, what do you say to an architect who won't sign the petition for fear of maybe losing a job or not getting a job, maybe not getting a commission? And that's a legitimate question, because, architects are out there trying to earn a living, and they join the American Institute of Architects to improve their situation. And then they're asked to sign a petition that, what if they're going after government contracts? Are they going to put their name on a petition? And you asked, what do we say to people like that? And my answer earlier was that you tell them, if they don't want to put their name down, they don't want to stand up and be counted, then contribute to those who are, because what the architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth are doing is entirely out of pocket, entirely out of the support of all the members of that organization. We contribute every month. That makes it possible for them to travel all the world and present all these videos. They give these videos away to people all over the world. I mean, I think Richard Gage has, I don't know the exact number, but over 30 or 40 cities in Europe he's visited, and he's dozens of cities in America. And all these trips cost money. And so if you don't want to put your name on a petition, at least throw some money into the kitty so other people can do their job. And it can be done, and we're going to win this thing. We're going to beat this thing, and it's not going to be easy. But I see the tide turning, especially now with politics throwing it around, even though they're not very sincere about it. But at least it's talking about it on a high level, a high exposure level. We'll see where that goes. I think the tide has turned, and it's going to get better. Better meaning we're going to make more progress towards bring the truth out.
Yeah, folks, we are having a major impact. I see it all the time. It's a lot different than when I started years ago. I made a resolution. I'm going to start calling it the four-dimensional impact of our activism. Maybe someday I'll explain why I've turned it from three-dimensional to four-dimensional. But over time, because I say that in these philosophical and physics videos that I like to watch on YouTube, they call time the fourth dimension.
Yes, it
really
is. Yes.
And so, over time, we're having an impact on the future. What you do right now, who you wake up, has an impact on what happens 5 years down the road, 1 year down the road, 20 years down the road, whatever. What you do is going to influence how people think about the world, about certain things that happen, and even if you don't see that congressman that you handed a Beyond Misinformation booklet to come out and say 9/11 was a controlled demolition, they might not vote for a certain piece of legislation as a result of it.
Well, there's still a lot to be done, and people, if you want to step up to the line and do something, stand up and be counted, it's not that hard to do. Get some videos, invite a dozen people over to your house and show the videos. Invite your friends that don't know anything about it to come and watch your videos, and that's a good way to get started. Build a little local group. I see it happening here in America. Every now and then another city has a group stepping up. And we have a couple of theaters here in Chicago that we have a venue that we're going to be showing these videos, these movies at free admission. We're going to dig in our own pockets to pay for the theater and just invite people to see these movies free. And we have literature, we have all these videos that we're going to be giving away. But, all those things cost money. So if anybody's interested, they should contribute to the group in California there, Richard Gage's group, because they're doing all the legwork. They're taking all the responsibility and producing all these documents and these films, and they're doing all the traveling and giving all the lectures, and they're doing a magnificent job, and they should be supported.
Right, and folks, keep tuning in to AE 9/11 Truth. There's going to be some exciting stuff coming down the pike and more resources available to you, believe me. And when we're ready to announce it, we will. But also, I talked a few weeks ago, there's an app on your phone. It's not put out by AE 9/11 Truth, but it's still a good app for getting the job done. It's called 9/11 Facts. It's got videos that you can call right up on your phone to show to people as you talk about Building 7, or as you talk about the molten metal coming out of the side of the building, or as you talk about the demolition squids racing down the sides of the Twin Towers as they came down. You can point it out right there. So there are tools available, and if you are resourceful and dedicated, you can figure it out. You can have a little utility belt right there on your phone, ready to do some outreach right there on the street, and get their email, make some local groups with them. Get together with folks and take advantage of everything that is being offered to you to help fight in this important information war. Richard, you have any other ideas for getting the word out, and any final words that you want to give to the audience before we close up the interview?
Well, I think the effort needs people and money. If you can do both, do it. But get involved in your local neighborhood. I'm lucky. I'm in a big city. I'm in Chicago, so we have a lot of opportunities here. But you don't have to be in a big city. You could be in Cincinnati. Just get a group together, start doing the videos, and you can get literature from AE 9/11 Truth, and you can hand out literature and videos, and get your neighbors involved, form a group of people, and if you get people involved, you'll see it build. It'll build itself. It doesn't take long, but it doesn't take a lot of effort to do it. Just call some friends over, get a case of beer, call some friends over, throw a video on TV. If you got a bigger venue like a theater that you can talk to the owners, maybe they'll donate a theater and let you show a video. Get a wider audience. Go to the newspapers. There's just any number of ways that you can help out. And if you can't do that, you know, if you're not physically able, or if you're intimidated to step up to the line, then donate money. That's all I can say, because this thing is not going to end. This is not going away. We're going to win this.
That's right, folks. And 99% of anything is just showing up and doing the work. A lot of times, if you put forth that effort, I found in life, everything just kind of falls into place. So we just got to keep on doing what we can, and I have no doubt in the end we're going to win this thing. Richard Wallace, thank you so much for coming on 9/11 Freefall.
My pleasure. Anytime.
This program's on every Thursday night on No Lies Radio at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. You can also download MP3s of this show from the Internet Archive by going to 911freefall.com. This is Andy Steele saying have a great week and good luck.